Well, I hope you've remembered what I said in the first two courses, because at this stage of the festival, my eyes are open, but there's not much working behind them. So we'll have to rely on how much you remember. First of all, let's just take a moment and go into our invocation. Om Sadasiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. It's just invoking all of the previous teachers who have taught their students, and those students have become teachers themselves and taught others, that as a result of hundreds, if not thousands of years, we are here today in this room. It's just paying thanks to that lineage as we start. And may this teaching be a benefit to us. Right, where were we? So what did we do? In the first, for those of you who, I realize that there's new people to this audience, slight pity on you, because we've done 3 hours of this stuff, and people have been scratching their heads for the first 2 days, so it's going to be even more head scratching today. So first, let's all go back to yesterday. The first day was mostly introduction. The second day we came to that final aspect, that this consciousness or this awareness is one, and it manifests in all the individuals. All right. This is not something that we've been able to go down the classical path of explaining every single stage that allows you to come to that conclusion. To put it into perspective, I teach Upanishads. There are 11 Upanishads. We've just completed the Katha Upanishad, and it took us 24 weeks. 1.5 hour class a week, but it took 6 months to do one of the Upanishads. All right. Bhagavad Gita is 700 verses, which is embedded into the 100,000 verses of the Mahabharata. Those 700 verses are in 18 chapters. A year and a half later, we've just completed chapter 14. Right. So when you come in here and you think, I'm going to get it all, I'm going to walk out of this tent enlightened, never mind. Okay. So we're just trying to give you a glimpse of this, this teaching in order for you to assess whether this is of interest to you, whether you want to pursue it in the future, you want to know more about it, or whether it's time to carry on doing whatever you're doing as a practice now. So we came to this culmination of what is this consciousness, and it's not that consciousness is within me. So one of my teachers, Swami Paramatmananda from Chennai, has this saying of 5 expressions of what consciousness is. Of course, I have students around here who should be able to recite these 5 at will, and they're all hiding their heads at the moment, which means that they too have forgotten. So let's go through the first 5. Consciousness is not a part, product, or a property of the body. It's a very difficult one to accept, right? We're not the body, we're not the mind. The consciousness, the awareness that is our true self, the big I, is not a part, product, or property of the body. Right? When you look at the mirror and you say, don't I look good today? That's the little I talking, and looking at the little I is the big I that allows you to be aware of the fact that the little I is talking about the little I. All right? Consciousness is a separate entity that pervades the body. All right? And enlivens the body. Third one, tricky. Consciousness is not limited by the size of the body. It's not that consciousness is within us, the little I, the mind and body, but the mind and body is within consciousness. because consciousness is one. It is infinite. All right. The fourth one, if it's infinite, that means it's permanent. Permanent means forever, which means that consciousness does not die when the body dies. Right? Very difficult things to accept unless you go through the studies in detail. Consciousness does not die when the body dies. When the body dies, it's not that consciousness has died, but the medium of expression is no longer there. Consciousness does not manifest in the body because the body is no longer there. That's why it appears to go. But it itself, being permanent, does not go forever. What does manifestation mean? Basically, it's like a light bulb. All right? I gave the example yesterday. Electricity, if you take electricity as the analogy of consciousness and the light bulb as our body, the filament as being our mind, when that light bulb fuses, it's not that the electricity is not there, but the medium of manifestation is no longer present for you to get light. Right? Consciousness is independent of the light bulb. How do we know that? Put electricity to a fan and it doesn't light up, it rotates. Put electricity to a heater, it doesn't rotate, it heats. Right? It is independent of the manifesting medium. That's the way to think about it. Okay? And you thought this would be a really, really easy class. It is. Let's go. We've done enough about the self. I said yesterday that there's only two things in the world. There's me and everything but me, right? What did I call me? Atma. What did I call everything else? Anatma, all right? And this is fabulous because there's clearly an anatma. How do I know? Well, I'm sitting down on the ground, all right, on my mat or whatever, on the chair, and there's the tent, there's the trees, there's other people. There's clearly anatma. Right? And Vedanta says, yes, this is a highly transactional world. All right? Clearly, it's a whole full world full of other objects, people, and situations. Anatma is clearly there. All right? It is transactional. It's useful. It's just not real. All right? It's there, it's useful, it's transactional, it's just not real. And the definition of reality, every word that one uses, one has to define because we're now looking at it with slightly different eyes. The definition of reality is something that exists in all periods of time. Right? Something that exists in the past, in the present, and will continue to exist in the future. Right? Something that exists in all periods of time is a definition of reality. And you look around you and you realize that nothing meets that definition. Does it? Nothing meets that definition. Everything has three phases to it. It has a birth or a creation. It has an existence for a period of time, and then it has a dissolution or destruction. Right? Everything, including ourselves, as effects, as objects, as this carpet, as the ground, the world, everything is created, exists, and dissolves. All right? And that's why in the tradition, for people who are not up to the stages of being able to understand the philosophy, these three aspects were defined, symbolized by three main demigods. Right? That's why we have Brahma as the god of creation, Vishnu as the god of existence, and Shiva as the god of dissolution. Okay? If you're not into the philosophy mindset, then you need to understand this concept in more physicality. And therefore, why not put an idol in front of you and put a concept around that to be able to get to everybody? There's only 3 stages of matter, all right? Creation, existence, dissolution. And everything that we have today is as a result of that, all right? This is getting really difficult, Ram. I haven't had breakfast yet. And you're saying that everything around me is actually not real, right? It's a difficult concept to get. So let's give a practical example. I hold in front of me a paper cup. Now, in true Vedantic style, this would be a clay pot. But I don't have clay pots here. I have it at home, but I forgot my clay pot. So I have a paper cup. Everybody understands what a paper cup is. Hands up anyone who doesn't understand what a paper cup is. Good. There you go. It's easy, right? Vedanta's easy. This is a paper cup. It is anatma, okay? It's an object in the world. It had a time of creation. It exists now. And at one time, it'll have a time of dissolution when it will no longer be a paper cup. Everybody agrees? Oh, this is really easy. I'm getting into this. All right. This is a paper cup. And if I told you that this paper cup is merely a concept, merely an idea, it does not have an independent reality of its own. It's not a substance. And you'll say, he's been on something. All right? This cup obviously holds water. You can drink from it. Transactionally, it's very useful. And that for that reason, when I hold it up, you understand it to be a cup. Okay? Everybody understands it to be a cup. It's made out of a paper cup. It's made out of paper. So this cup, which is a paper cup, has a cause. What is the cause of this paper cup? Paper. All right? That's the material cause of this cup. It also has an intelligent cause. What's the intelligent cause? The engineer who figured out a machine to be able to turn paper into a cup. So every object in the world consists of 2 things: the material from which it comes, and then the intelligent cause who crafted the material into that object. Does that seem easy? All right? So a carpenter is the intelligent cause for a table for which the material cause is wood. Potter is the intelligent cause. Clay is the material cause for a pot. Easy? Okay. This is an effect, all right? It's a cup. Every effect has a cause. That was lecture number 1, all right? Every effect has a cause. The cause of this effect is paper, all right? If I were to take this paper cup and make little tearings in it, for which I'm grateful that the top of the paper cup was cut with a pair of scissors, all right? Then I can make these little insertions, and hey, presto, I now have a flower. Okay? Clearly had a cup that I could drink from. I now have a flower. Where did the cup go? Ask yourself, where did the cup go? Because the material cause is still here, the paper's still here, but where did the cup go? Suddenly I've got a flower. The cup was merely a word, a concept, an idea that I used for paper rearranged in a particular form. Okay? Now I have a paper flower. Cause is paper. What is a flower? Flower, in this case, is paper organized. The name is flower, all right? And is paper reorganized in the form of a flower, right? Name and form. All objects are names and forms of their cause. All objects are names and forms of their cause. The cause of this happens to be paper, but paper is the effect. What's the cause of paper? All right? Because all paper is the cause of paper reorganized as paper. The cause of paper are fibers. Whatever fibers you have in paper, whatever type of paper you have, they are the ultimate cause of paper. Paper is the effect. It doesn't have a substantial nature of its own. It's a name and form. It's a concept of fibers. The fibers are the effect. What's the cause of the fibers? Molecules. All the fibers are, the long fibers that make up paper, are merely strings of molecules. What is the cause of molecules? Atoms. All molecules are merely atoms reorganized. Right? What's the cause of atoms? Subatomic particles. Right? What's the cause of subatomic particles? I don't know. The quarks and all those things that they talk about. What is the cause of that? Because every effect is the cause reorganized as the effect. Everybody get that? All right? There, if you go back and back and back, there must be a causeless cause. Why? Because otherwise you'll go into infinite regression forever. There must be something at the end of that cycle which is the cause of every other effect. And that causeless cause in Vedanta is called Brahman. It comes from the Sanskrit word bra, meaning big. It's as big as it gets, because it's infinite. The infinite cause from which everything else is derived is called Brahman. Right? So everything else is Brahman reconstituted as an object of the world. Brahman is real because there is never a time when it was not. It's the causeless cause. The paper flower is not real because it only has an existence now, and when we throw it away or it gets burnt or pulped, it will no longer be. Everybody understand reality? Great. You can go back into the dining area and say, I understand reality. All right, the causeless cause. Let's give it another example because this needs to stick in your mind. All right, I gave the example of the table. Intelligent cause, carpenter. Material cause, wood. All right, do you understand? The wood is in effect. What is in the fibers that make up wood? All right, what's the cause of that? Molecules, atoms, back and back and back. Brahman. Right? The table, the effect of the table, is called a dependent reality. Let's just take the case of the table and wood. All right? Let's say that the wood was the cause, and we aren't going to go all the way back to Brahman. Let's just use the example of table and wood. All right? The table has no substantiality of its own. All right? You say, I find that really difficult to believe because I could have a table, it weighs 10 kilos, I can put my computer on it, desk on it, I can work on it, I can lie on it, I can sit on it, I can stand on it. It seems to be pretty substantial to me, all right? But if you look at it, and I break up the table, and I use that wood to make a chair, I can do the same example. Where did the table go? The table is an idea. It's reconstituted wood. and the 10 kilos of the table, you said, that surely means that it's material. I said, okay, if it's material, I tell you what, you keep the table and I'll keep the wood. All right? How much does the table weigh? And how much does the wood weigh? If the wood weighs 10 kilos, how much does the table weigh? Nothing. It's a concept, it's an idea that we use. And we get lost because of the way that we use language. We say it's a wooden table. We use wooden as an adjective to the table, all right? To separate it from a metal table or a plastic table, correct? So a wooden table, and what's the noun? Oh, this is not a grammar class. But what is the noun? The noun is table. What's the adjective? It's wooden. So we take the noun as the substantive. When we say tall man, something that's never applied to me, when we say tall man, we're saying man is the noun, tall is the adjective. Okay, that's easy to understand. It's the tallness belongs to the man. All right? When we say wooden table, we use table as the noun, as wooden as the adjective. But actually, it's the tableness property that belongs to the wood. It should be a tabley wood. Right? Correctly speaking, it should be tabley wood. But we don't do it like that. We get really confused. We've got confused with adjectives and nouns. We don't know what is substantial and what is not. The table borrows its reality from the wood. If the wood was not there, it would not be. The wood can be something else, but the table can only be wood. All right? The wood can be a chair. It can be something else. The wood can exist independent of the table. The table cannot exist independent of the wood. Do you see? The wood has an independent existence. The table has a dependent existence. Do you follow? The wood can exist by itself without being a table. The table cannot exist without the wood. You could apply that to everything. The shirt is cloth, all right? The cloth can exist without being a shirt. The shirt cannot exist without being cloth. Dependent and independent reality. When it's an independent reality like the wood, we call it satyam. We call it truth, real. And when it's a dependent reality, we call it mithya, all right? It's a dependent reality. It does not have a substantial nature of its own. It's a word, it's a concept, it's a notion in your mind for something that is transactionally useful in life. Look at every object in the world and you find that that is so. All right. Now if you said that the definition of reality is that it exists in all periods of time, and we don't find that in any property that we see. All right? That's why in Vedanta we say that the world is not real. It's useful, it's transactional, it's just not real. Now, obviously, the world exists. I hope it exists for most of us, right? And we transact with it. So what is it? What is it that exists as the world? And you have to take it, the best way to take it is from the English itself. We say that here is a table, here is a cup, here is a person, all right? For every object in the world that we talk about, we say it is, don't we? Even when we don't have an object, we say it is not. It is not. The one single property about every object in the world is isness. is existence. Right? That never changes. The wood is, becomes the table. The table is. The table becomes ash. The ash is. The one thing that's constant throughout all of those is isness, is existence. And it never changes. The form, the name and form changes, but the existence does not. Right? And that's the clue. Something that does not change is real. And it's the existence that is real in all of the objects and situations and people that we have in the world. And when something does not change form, it means that it has no edge. How do we get to that? If something is infinite, it does not change, in order to go from one state to the other requires a change, right? If you have a table of a limited size, then and a little ant walks across it, it goes table, 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 no table, all right? There's an edge to it. If the table was infinitely big, then the ant would go on forever. There is no edge. It's limitless. Something that is there all the time has no edge, has no limit. It's infinite. The isness, the existence is infinite. Right? And if it is infinite, and we talk about yesterday, consciousness is one and infinite. Now we have two infinite things. We have awareness and consciousness, infinite. Isness, existence, infinite. Surely these two infinite things are going to clash, aren't they? There can only be one infinite thing, because infinite means that there is nothing but that. So consciousness and existence must be one and the same thing, seen from two different perspectives. Consciousness is seen from the perspective of the individual as the awareness of every thought and deed, and consciousness seen from the perspective of the world is the existence of all objects. These are difficult concepts. I've had students that are with me for 10 years, and I ask them to explain this, and they go, right? This can be difficult concepts. They're one and the same thing. The Western idea is that you have material, and the material clumps itself into single-celled creatures and eventually gets more complex, and you get an individual with some sort of brain function, and ping, consciousness comes into existence. That's the scientific view. Vedanta says the opposite. There's only consciousness. And therefore all material things, us, trees, grass, everything, the whole universe, is a manifestation of consciousness. It's the other way around. It's not that material thing produces consciousness, but consciousness produces matter. All right? We have the Big Bang theory that says from the infinitely small single point of singularity, one Big Bang, and this entire universe is created. All right? How big was the point of singularity? If you have a point of singularity, all right, I'm very scientific here, how big is it? Is it about this big? A micron or something like that? Thing is, the point of singularity All the scientists can tell you what happened in a zillionth of a second after the Big Bang. What they can't tell you is what happened a zillionth of a second, after the Big Bang. They can't tell you what happened a zillionth of a second before the Big Bang. And why can't they tell you that? Before the Big Bang, there was no manifestation of the universe. Therefore, there was no manifestation of space, distance. If there's no manifestation of distance, there's no manifestation of time. Space and time go together. Time is the amount of time, the length of time it takes you to traverse a length of distance. That's why time and space goes together. At the point of singularity, there is no space, there is no time. Therefore, you cannot measure it. It's a silly question to ask, because all of your reference points for asking the question no longer exists. Right? Oh, but surely time is constant. I've seen the ticking of a clock. All right? Is time constant? When you dream, you create your dream world. Does it have hills and mountains and people and conversations and rivers and birds flying around? All right? In a dream, you've created all of those objects. You've created all of those objects. Where did those objects come from? Your mind. Okay? You're the creator. They exist during the duration of your dream, and they dissolve when you wake up or when the dream finishes. You make your entire world within your dream. You do that every night. Is dream time the same as wake time? No. In a dream, in 2 minutes, you can marry, have children, they have children, and they stick the grandchildren upon you while they go and do other things more interesting, and then they graduate, and you go to graduation parties, and it's been only 2 minutes. Clearly, dream time is on a completely different scale to wake time, right? Dream time is dependent upon dream space. You create another world, and within that world, you have another notion of time. This notion of time that we have here is entirely invented, just like all the products in the world, right? It's really tough to accept. But we have the practical example. So what is the point of singularity? The point of singularity is the world in potential form. The world in potential form, it has to be, because Big Bang theory says that the entire universe came from that one point of singularity. That was the potential from which the universe existed. So the universe is existent now, but its potentiality was at the point of singularity. Do people follow that? So we have this concept of manifested and unmanifested, right? Unmanifested is the potential state from which the manifested state comes into existence. This we call birth. Birth of a product, birth of a human, whatever. From the unmanifested to the manifested state. Then it returns from the manifested state to the unmanifested state. It's a cycle. From unmanifest to manifest to unmanifest. This is the cycle of birth, existence, and resolution. And it happens at all the levels. It happens at a microscopic level on microscopic germs, at a macro level with the universe. It's all the same cycle, different time frames. Okay? So what is that that is in unmanifested form, that manifests as this entire universe, including us. And Vedanta says that is the causeless cause, Brahman, in unmanifested form, is there. It always exists, but currently it exists as unmanifested form. Why can't you see things when it's unmanifested? Because it hasn't manifested yet, all right? I give very simple questions. You're supposed to have these very simplistic answers. Why, and what, let me try and explain this manifestation and unmanifestation business, all right? You're standing in front of one of our fires, and it's lovely, nice and warm, drumming or no drumming, depending on your view, all right? You're in front of the fire, and it's nice and hot. Where is the heat being manifested? Simple question. Where is the heat being manifested? In the fire, in the wood. Okay, the wood is burning. Good, good question, good answer. Wrong, but it's a good answer. Okay, so the heat is manifested in the wood. That's why you can see it burning. It's clearly coming towards you. Can you feel the heat? Where is the heat being manifested? In your hands, in your body. You've got that heat principle. Is coming from the wood, is clearly traveling towards you, all right? And it's hitting you, and you can now sense it, right? Is there heat between the wood and you? There has to be. Otherwise it could never reach you, correct? Is it manifested? You can't detect it. It's actually heating the air that can detect it. The molecules and the bugs that are flying around in the air, they feel the manifestation of it. You do not. And we glibly turn around and say, the heat is in the logs, not in the air. But it's everywhere. The heat principle happens to be everywhere. It happens to be the principle that drives us and keeps our body warm. All right? Is manifested within us as the heat principle. It's in the wood. It's in between. It's in the feeling of the heat. All right? It's manifest in the wood because we can perceive it. It's manifest in us so that we can feel it. But it is actually everywhere. It's like an electric wire, right? Unmanifested electricity. Stick a bulb on one end, manifests as light. Stick a fan at one end, manifests as rotation. It's universal, right? This Brahman, this one underlying causeless cause, is universal, in which everything else is manifest. And is manifest for a period of time, after which it dissolves back into its unmanifested state. Does everybody understand that I had breakfast this morning with something that was unreal, and I ate with a spoon which wasn't real either, and it went into me that's not real, and I'm just a dependent reality of a bunch of atoms which are a dependent reality ultimately down to Brahman. We are all one. Right. Do people have questions on that? I haven't understood it well enough to have a question, Ram. You have to gently think about it in the bath, all right, when there's no one around, and just cycle through it again. Or come to one of my classes a long time. Can we get a microphone to this person, please?
Morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It seems to me a bit unsatisfactory to use this subdivision of the world as a way of finding Brahman. Because I think it's easy to notice that as you look at anything, you can realize with a little bit of reflection that you're doing two things at once. You're seeing the bicycle, and you know that the bicycle is made up of parts. And so the concept of a bicycle becomes how do I say? Let me just calm myself down. I'm very nervous.
You're right. No, it's okay. It's a very good theme, by the way.
You know, as
Yes.
you look at the bicycle, that it is made up of parts, and you can break those parts up and lay them down.
Yes.
And those can become separate parts. You can then
Yes.
call something a wheel, which
Yes.
you know is made up with spokes
That's right.
and rubber, etc.
Yes.
But it seems to me as though the pattern of subdivision has begun. The physical world is divisible by parts, seemingly infinitely, to the point at which we all understand. Because, I don't know, I'm not a molecular biologist or anything. So to me, it goes to the place that I would imagine it goes to with most people, of atoms, molecules, neutrons, electrons, protons, quarks.
Yeah.
But then, someone who understands quarks better than I do may subdivide quarks.
That's right.
So the pattern has begun,
Yes.
and it seems as though there's just an understanding cliff edge upon which you fall over and assume Brahman. At the end of your understanding of the world, you assume Brahman. So it just seems unsatisfactory to me because it seems like an assumption.
What is the assumption based on? It's based on the fact that every effect does have a cause. All right. So when you take the smallest particle that you currently study, the scientists then spend another 200 billion pounds in trying to figure out what is the cause of that particular particle. So they've already gone into that mode. The reason that we make the assumption that there is something from which something is made is because that is the way we've seen everything so far. Yes, you're making that assumption, but it's a realistic assumption that every effect has a cause.
But it's not an assumption. A bicycle is made up of parts.
Yes,
A wheel is made up of parts.
yes.
Why assume that to me, it seems like an assumption to me.
So if you say that an atom is made out of subatomic particles, why wouldn't you assume that a subatomic particle is made out of other things?
Yes. Why not assume that doesn't go on infinitely?
Because they haven't found the last point yet, right? And the Vedanta says that if you can carry on looking, and it says that you don't have to look forever, you can get to the last point. It is in the Vedas, and in order to accept that, subject to future verification, you need Shraddha. Shraddha is a word that we discussed earlier on. It means that I've got a source of knowledge coming through a lineage that I now trust that's telling me something that I don't know. And I'm going to, if I challenge that, it's based on what I do know. All right? And if you challenge something new based on what you do know, then you won't accept what is new. And so Shraddha says that this makes logical sense to me for now. I will assume this to be true, subject to future verification. I'm going to carry on studying until I understand what is really meant by this phrase. And that's what Vedanta study is all about, is to hear an idea we're all one, man. All right? You've heard that idea from lots of hippies before. What does it mean? I want to understand this deeply. E equals mc squared. I've heard about this. I trust it. I reckon Einstein was brighter than me, so I'm going to assume that this is true. Ultimately, this professor will tell me how to derive that so that I can know for certain. So the whole of Vedantic teaching is based on that, because it's completely turning your world on its head, saying that you're not matter that is then conscious. You're consciousness that is matter, right? All of everything that you consider to be real actually aren't real, right? They're useful, they're not real. It's turning all that you don't have a finite lifetime. You are immortal. Everything that I've believed since birth, it just turns on its head. And in order to accept those things, you have to say, it's interesting. I can't disprove it at the moment. So I will accept it subject to future verification. That's the way the teaching methodology works. Because without it, you can never learn anything new. That's why I said right at the beginning, class number 1, the greatest obstacle to life and to learning is opinion. An opinion is based on what you know. All right? Opinion is based on what you know being true for you. But that's why they call it opinion rather than the truth. If somebody has 2 different opinions about the same thing, then clearly opinion is not the truth. It's your idea. Based on what? Based on everything you know. Do you know everything? No. And therefore, why should I have an opinion about something new that I know nothing about? My view should be, I'm going to put that opinion to one side. Let me learn a bit more, then I'll be in a position to be able to judge. Because I'm currently not in a position to be able to judge, because I don't know. I want to hear more. Tell me more. I want to hear all you've got to say, Shravanam. Remember these complex words? Then I want to analyze it. I want to ask you all the questions in the world until you and I both get tired, but until I've resolved every single doubt I have in what you've just said, what the Vedas have said, Mananam. And then when I no longer have some doubts, I'm not going to just have it knowledge of my intellect. I'm going to live it by imbibing that knowledge through every cell of my body. So that when I react to something, see, when we react to something, it's not through an intellectual response. When somebody hits you and you hit them in the face, that was not an intellectual analysis, all right? When somebody threatens you and you threaten them back, when somebody says nasty things and you shout back at them, that is not an intellectual analysis. That is a reaction, right? You want to be the creator. You don't want to be the reactor. You have to change the position of the sea. Reaction, creation. All right? You need to be able, when you react instantly, it needs to be through that knowledge, rather than these responses that you've trained yourself to respond with to date. So, good question, all right? It takes more time than we have here to go to the ultimate. Why is the assumption that Brahman is the ultimate? It ties in with a lot of other material so that it seals itself into an entire model that has no flaws. But you have to study an entire model in order to come to that idea. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Oh, 2 questions at the back. Can we have the microphone to the back, please? To the back, raise your hands. I expect you to be practically enlightened, because I know I've seen you. This is the third time you've been in my class. You're almost there. You'll be floating out of this tent in a few minutes, I can tell.
I wish I was. I wish I was.
Okay.
You gave two names for something that's truth and something that's not. What are the Sanskrit terms for them?
So Satyam is the
Satyam.
one that is true, is an independent reality. Is Satyam. Satyam would be the closest spelling we can do in English. And then that which is a dependent reality is Mithya, Mithya, Mithya. And therefore, the wood, in our example, analogy, wood was Satyam, the table is Mithya. Okay? One is an independent reality. It can be other things. It can exist without the table. The table is a dependent reality. It cannot exist independent of the wood. Right? Satyam, Mithya. Wow, I'm into Sanskrit now. Is it great? Okay. There was one more question at the
The
back.
second question I had
yes,
was
the second question.
you mentioned that opinion is an obstruction, but in my life I find that sometimes belief is an obstruction, maybe a bigger obstruction, because I grew up as a Christian.
Yes.
And then I started this knowledge of Vedanta maybe a few years ago.
Yes.
And I find it difficult sometimes to communicate it, or to even bring up a discussion along those lines, because our
Okay.
belief, if it's not in the Bible, is I don't believe in that. And
Very-
then
very
sometimes
important.
that ends there.
Very important question. This, of course, brings up the G word. We don't say the G word out aloud in these tents. And that is a belief system. And it is, Vedanta says that that belief in a higher power, belief in, can I just say God? Will everybody not start to shuffle? All right. Belief in God, all right, is not an obstruction. And hear my next sentence. Belief in God is mandatory. Right? Belief in God is mandatory in order to be able to understand who you are. We just have to define what God is. All right? We just have to define what God is. But belief in God is a mandatory step. That's why you go from karma, which is performing actions in order to achieve results for yourself, to karma yoga, where you start to perform actions where the primary beneficiary are people other than, or environments other than yourself, although you may also derive a benefit. That is the preparatory stage for you to go to upasana, which is the meditation that allows you to free up the space within you for the wisdom to come. All right? Once you've got to that stage, you're already at the position of thinking, of knowing that I am not the creator of everything in my life. All right? That there is something that's driving the rest of the system. I don't know what it is that drives the rest of the system, but it's given to me. This body was given to me, that I have 2 lungs instead of 1 given to me. I have 1 liver instead of 2 was given to me. This air that I'm breathing is given to me. I did not do anything to create them. All right? This earth was given to me. If everything was given to me, you have to ask the question, is there a giver? You have to. That's why it's been asked thousands of years ago. All right? And this concept of the giver is what we call God. Now you have to understand who the giver is. So the first stage of going from an egotistical lifestyle to one that acknowledges that there's things around me, that I am given things, allows you to move from everything is my creation, there is no such thing, I'm a total atheist, there's no such thing as God, to the next stage is having a personal God. Saying, oh Jesus, please give me good exam marks tomorrow. All right? So the first stage is that we invent this higher power in order to be able to achieve the results that we want personally, the results that we cannot create independently. So you go from the ego self to starting to think about another power to whom you can ask for help, a prayer, the technical term for it, a prayer so that you can achieve the things that you wanted to achieve for yourself that you couldn't do by your actions alone. All right? And then you start to think, hang on a minute, I'm praying to this cross or this Krishna or whatever, my personal God. But the definition of God is all-powerful, all-knowing, everywhere. Everybody's definition of God is omnipresent, omniscience, omnipotent. There's 3 omnis in there, all right? That's the definition of God. If that is the case, then God is not in this cross, is not in this idol. God is ever present. It must be in everything. And therefore, you go from the low sophistication of a Western God to the high sophistication of a native God. When a native Indian or an Aborigine thinks about God, he calls it the trees and the mountains and the rivers. He says, God must be everywhere. It can't possibly be standing in the middle of this temple here. God must be everything. So he goes around and treats the world as if it's God. All right? An omnipresent God is everywhere. Then you come to the realization that an omnipresent God that is in everything must also be me. Because I am an object in the world. God is omnipresent. Right? And it suddenly dawns, and you're progressing now. This is your spiritual journey. That's why belief is mandatory. Belief in God is mandatory, otherwise you'll never get out of stage 1. You'll never get out of this egotistical, I drive the world, right? And the only thing I have to do is collect as many toys before I die, all right? You get out of that by inventing a personal God. Then you go what's called Vishwarupa. You go to everything being God. And then you realize, oh my God, God must also be me. The same underlying reality that is the plant outside must be the same underlying reality as me. What you don't say is, I am God. Otherwise they put you in little white coats and they take you away in vans. All right? You don't say, I am God. You say, God is also me. All right? And now you're getting to this stage that you are a manifestation of that same underlying reality as God. If I'm that way, then why do I pray? I pray because I live in this transactional, dualistic world where I need transactions to be successful in order to be able to feed myself, clothe myself, house myself, look after my dependents. I want things to go right for me. And since I don't control the little I, don't control the entire world, I can still say a prayer. Ultimately, when you realize that there is only one thing, right? There is not two. Advaita, there is not two. Then that one thing must be the same as my idea of God. And that must be the underlying reality of me. Then this idea of religion disappears. All right? But to get there, you must start with a devotional path. That's why karma yoga, bhakti yoga, to jnana yoga. Jnana yoga is knowledge. You cannot jump that stage. Most people go through that path, and most people say, never again. You know, I did my confessions, I'm not going to go back there. You don't need to go back there. You can progress forward. But the very fact that you were at that devotional stage meant that you got out of your ego state, thinking that I know everything, I am all there is to know. All right? Then the everything is there. And then the benefit is just immense. Because once you know that the underlying reality of you is that one uninterrupted, edgeless thing, all right, that has no end, that is immortal, it removes the greatest fear that we have, which of course is death. Your body dies, but you do not. All right? So what makes this world? This world is a play. Shakespeare said, we're but mere actors. Enjoy the play. Just as the actor plays an incredible part as the beggar, so believable as the beggar, and he gets kicked on stage, all right? Fantastic beggar. And he goes back to the green room and he puts on his Armani suit and he walks out of the theater. He's not the beggar, he was playing a role. Our problem is we play the role and we leave the theater still a beggar. We forget we're playing the role. Mother, father, daughter, child, aunt, uncle, teacher, engineer, doctor, we're playing roles, right? It's not the real you. Enjoy the role. Remember, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. You're here to enjoy. Enjoy the play. Participate it totally. Don't do harm, but get as much out of it as you can. Help other people as much as you can. You're meant to do that. That is your role in life. But to understand enough to understand who you really are. And if we do that, the first consequence of that is what's called, you have control over your emotions. You have control over your emotions because you have control over your opinion. Opinions drive emotions. As I said, do people remember that when you have an opinion, right, and what happens is different to that opinion, then you have in between is called pain. And we normally, to associate that pain, I said we use the worst word in the English language. Can you remember what that was? Should. You should never use the word should. Should means that you are thinking what happened, what should have happened are different. And the distance between them is called emotional pain. The further the distance, the worse is the pain. What has happened has happened. Forget it, right? What is happening now has also just happened. Forget it. Right? The moment you've done it, it's already happened. You cannot change a changeless thing. Forget it. Work on how you're going to work on the future based on the resources available to you now. All right? Don't spend time in the past. Don't use the word should. As I said, if the word should comes along, go and lie down for a while until the word goes away. Never use the word should, because the should is driving that because you had a strong desire for something to be, you had a bound desire for something to be the way it should, you thought it should be. And when that desire resulted in an action that was different to that, you got all emotionally strung about it, because a desire that manifests, all right, a desire that is interrupted by something else, some other situation, some other people, right, generates anger. A desire unfulfilled is anger, right? If anger was the coin, what's on the flip side of the coin? Nobody remembers. The flip side of the coin is greed. Desire fulfilled leads to greed. So what happens if you have a desire? This should happen this way, and it does happen that way, and it's marvelous. What's your next action? Oh, more. I want more of that. That was really good. I would like some more, please. All right? A desire fulfilled leads to greed. A desire unfulfilled leads to anger. And the difference and the level of unfulfillment determines the level of anger. Yes, question over here. Question. All right, okay, you first. Then we'll get back to you.
Sorry. I'm assuming that you are in the final stage, or otherwise I'm struggling to understand how you can sit there and explain Vedanta to the rest of us. But how do you know when you get there? Because if there is anything at all that says you have reached it, surely that's somebody else's perception that you've reached it. So how do you know when you're there?
Okay.
Because you keep saying things shouldn't. There's a chain of cause and an effect.
Like
I'm
that.
struggling to think, well, what makes that magic transition from the previous stage to the final stage?
Yes, all right. That's very good. So we'll have the mic brought down here, please. And while I answer that question, one of the things that happens is, so what are the benefits? Why do it? You know, it seems jolly hard, and quite honestly, Coronation Street is better viewing. All right. So why bother to spend my time? And Madhuriya, there's a person down here that needs the mic. So why bother? And the benefit, immediate benefit, is threefold, and you can remember it by the acronym FIR. All right? By understanding more, the frequency of your emotions will go down. The number of times that you get emotional about the subject will reduce. All right? That's the F, the frequency. I, the intensity. The intensity of that emotional response will reduce. Because what does emotion do? It just creates grief within you. All right? You want to reduce that because I want to be happy. I want to be permanently happy. To do that, I've got to reduce my emotional response and the number of times I become emotional about the subject. So frequency of response, the intensity of that response, and the length of time that intensity takes to resolve itself down. All right? FIR. That is the benefit of this. And you end up with being more calm, more collected, and more self-confident. Now when somebody calls you a donkey, you say, I'm not a donkey. Previously you would have turned around and hit them. Why? Because you took offense at a statement that is clearly untrue, and that anger was self-generated. He didn't project anger out of his mouth. You generated that anger completely by yourself. Right? The way you change, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, as Wayne Dyer would say. All right? And it does change. It brings about that calmness. But in order to do that, right, I don't want to do too many acronyms, but in order to do that, you've got to do the 4 Ds. All right? First D we talked about was the discrimination. You need to be able to discriminate between those actions that take you down your spiritual path or take you in the opposite direction. Right? Secondly, you need dispassion. The actions, the things that happen, you need to be detached from that result. You need to be dispassionate about them. You have your desire to do things. Without desire, you cannot start any action, right? If you're desperate to go to the bathroom, you have to have a desire to go to the bathroom. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. You need desire to be able to get out of bed. You need those desires, but as I said, unfulfilled desires leads to anger. So you need what is called non-binding desires. You need to have a desire to improve yourself and the world, all right? If they don't happen, you need to be detached from it. So you need this state of mind that is dispassionate. Doesn't mean that you don't have passion. You have a strong sense of desire to do things to help people. But if it doesn't result in the outcome you expected, you are no longer attached to that outcome. You just move on. What's the next thing I can do? What can I learn from this experience so that I can perform the next action better? Dispassionate, right? The third one is discipline. You need to not go back to your old way of thinking, right? Vedanta, if you marinate in this wisdom, you stop yourself from going back to your old response state. You need the discipline to be able to say, I want to hear this. I want to understand this. I want to live this. You need that discipline. And what's that discipline leading to? The 4D, the fourth D, actually is desire. But is desire for what? Desire for moksha. Desire for freedom. I want that fast track ticket to freedom. Moksha. And because moksha is infinite, is the complete elimination of samsara, right? It is an infinite state. The infinite state means that you already are in that state. You just don't know it. You're ignorant of it, and therefore to remove the ignorance, you need the knowledge. To do the knowledge, you need the discipline. To do the discipline, you need to be dispassionate. In order to do it, you need the discrimination. You need the 4 Ds to be able to get there. And the benefit of that is that you can just get on and enjoy this life. You know that the happiness is not derived from outside, is derived from you, and it's not hidden by a curtain of emotion. That is the benefit that you get. You are happy, you eliminate samsara while living. Vedanta makes a very strong claim. It doesn't say it's the only way of removing suffering. Sorry. It doesn't say it's one of the many ways you can do bhakti, you can be devotional, and you can get rid of suffering. It doesn't say that. Vedanta says it's the only mechanism for the removal of suffering, is to understand who you truly are. That's the only mechanism to remove suffering. So that is the major benefit. And how do you know when you're in that state? I'm sorry, it's a very long answer. How do you know that you're in that state? Suffering leaves you. You no longer get attacked by what people say and do. That is them. That is their karma. That is their prarabdha karma. That is their agami karma that they're generating by their actions now. I need not participate in that. They're just not a very good actor in this play. I'm a better actor. All right? You get that dispassion, and it brings you down. That is the benefit. It's not for other people to see. Right? Many enlightened people who understand this, they never say, oh, I'm enlightened. Some people say, I achieved enlightenment at 10:56 on Tuesday the 27th. All right? There are some who say that. But it's that position because all you're trying to do, this study is not about anyone else. It's about yourself. As I said, the subject matter is the most interesting thing I know about. That's me. I want to know who I am because then I can relate to the entire world. It's that self-benefit. And what happens, as you get calmer, some of my students will tell you, right? Not only are they calm, but the way they react to the world is slightly different. And people around them start asking, what are you on? Because whatever you're on, I want a bit of that myself. And you fan that out. You're not trying to persuade them, right? Go and study this thing. When they say, how come you're calmer than you used to be? You can say, because this is what I came to know, right? It's all for the self, because that will affect everything and everybody that you touch. And you'll see that effect within yourself. All right, you will. Question.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing up the unfulfilled unfulfilled and fulfilled desire again, because that was my question yesterday.
Right.
And then it went. But you have answered a little bit of it now. So
Right.
obviously unfulfilled desire is anger, which we don't want.
Yes.
Fulfilled is greed, which we think greed we don't want. But
Yes.
surely aren't we being greedy here? Because we're seekers, we want moksha, we want to, is that greed? We want to be better. So are we greed? Is it good or bad? Is it greed?
So, yes, the desire to thinking about being a seeker, and most of you might classify yourself in that category. I'm a seeker, that's why I'm here, right? That's why I'm not lounging around somewhere else on a Sunday. So I'm here because I'm a seeker, all right? And what is this knowledge saying? All right. Yes, you have that desire. You have that desire to know what it is that. What is it that you're wanting to know? You're wanting to know who you are. All right. If who you are is that ultimate reality, and that ultimate reality is also me, the seeker and the sought are one and the same thing. All right. You are seeking. What am I? Right. I want to know for certain. You are that. You are that ultimate reality manifested currently as this individual with the mind that is asking the question of who am I? And once that knowledge comes, then the seeker goes away and the seeker realizes, I was always here.
But what about just to make yourself better in life? If you're constantly, it's a desire, isn't it? If you want to study, whether it's for your, your skills or just life.
Yeah. It is, as I said, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Artha is the acquisition of wealth, right? Kama is the acquisition of enjoyment. You're meant to do that. These are the primary goals in life, but you must do it with dharma. You must do it with ethics. Your primary role, that's why the Vedas are split in that way. The majority of it, because it realizes the majority of the world are only interested in personal benefits. So it's like an app. They've got a mantra for that. I want a baby, there's a mantra for that. I want more money, there's a mantra for that. All you have to do is follow that mantra, follow that ritual, and it guarantees, if you can do it properly, you will achieve that result for yourself. And sooner or later you realize that everything that you have collected throughout your life does not make you permanently happy. And you say, there must be something more, or you come across a calamity in your life, and you cannot solve it with everything that you've acquired, everything that you know, everything that you are, and you ask yourself the question, is there something else that I'm currently not aware of? And it drives you to be a seeker. And you get to the end of the seeking path when you realize, I was always there. I am that which I sought. I had to go along that path. I had to acquire in order to look after myself, because I live in a transactional world. People are dependent on me. I've got to do that. I've got to try and improve that. But within the ethical path, I'm not going to hurt others in that process. I'm not going to hurt the planet in that process. I have to go through that process. I have to go from the egotistical me through the belief system of what God really is, and ultimately understand God is also me. That entire path is the way that the Vedas are written. And the wisdom part are the Upanishads that are the end, the anta of the Vedas. Indeed, that's why it's called Vedanta. And Advaita Vedanta, which is what I teach, says that there is not two. There's only the one thing. Sat, existence, Chit, consciousness, Ananda, happiness, unlimited. Sat, existence, is the same as Chit, consciousness, Ananda, unlimited happiness. Right? That's why they say Sat, Chit, Ananda. Okay? Now, I have got a little book that I put some of these words down a few years ago now. It's in very small writing. You need an optional microscope to read it. That's because we had to print it in 40 pages because that's all we could afford in this. We are a charity. You realize that this is all run as a charity that my wife and I started, and it was to spread this knowledge, the whole breadth of yoga, to as many people as we could. So it's operated as not-for-profit. The book, hopefully, is going to be in the info tent. They'll ask you for £10 for it, but you can, if you want to buy it, you can buy it there. I do classes, and I'm starting a new class in September. The details are in the brochure in front of you. But this takes some time. Vedanta takes some time to listen to ask the questions, and Nididhyasanam, to be totally immersed in it, to be marinated, because we need to shift the way that we think. And this takes time because we spent 30, 40, 50 years thinking the way that we have done. And it's not an instant thing. It'll take some time. I hope that these few sessions has given you a little taste of what this subject is all about. Thank you very much for joining me. If we can just close with a closing prayer. Om Purnamadam Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishtate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.